Doo 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 doo. Whole lot of hoeing. Doo 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 doo. Generation 3 was a tumultuous time for the Pokemon franchise. Pokemania had ended, and during this era, Pokemon had pretty much left the mainstream consciousness, with only the most dedicated fans and new players sticking around for what came next. In addition, the Game Boy was finally dead after nearly 20 years, and the shiny new Game Boy Advance was making the rounds. With the advancement of technology came a Pokemon generation bigger and better than ever. There was room for better sprites, less need to worry about cartridge space, and other stuff that came with more technology. This generation introduced many things that have since become staples in the franchise and reshaped how Pokemon will be made from this point forward. For one, abilities were introduced, which are mechanics that each Pokemon have that have either effects in battle or in the overworld. While early gen Pokemon were retroactively given abilities, the new batch of Pokemon this generation and every generation since were built with these abilities in mind. So therefore, some of them are entirely defined by their abilities, for better or for worse. In addition, double battles were introduced, and I guess as a way to promote that system, several Pokemon were made that, while separate species, are pretty clearly meant to be paired with another Pokemon. Well, now that we got mechanics out of the way, let's get to the Mons themselves. Hoenn gave us 135 brand new Pokemon. Well, mostly brand new. Two of them are babies of previous Pokemon, so 133 brand new Pokemon. Not as much as Gen 1, but still an impressive amount, since, as I said, unlike Gen 2, all but two of the Pokemon this go around are original. So this video is going to be a lot longer than our Johto journey. Well, without further ado, let's get into the Pokemon that were introduced in the Gen with Too Much Water. Ladies and gentlemen, the Pokemon of Generation 3. Frico is a gecko and the grass starter of the Hoenn games. Sadly, though, biology-wise, there's not much to say, as it's just mentioned that they can scale vertical walls, like a gecko. I mean, they can also predict the weather, but still, they're one of those Pokemon that's basically just the real-world animal, but more anthro. In fact, none of its Pokedex entries even mention anything to do with its grass typing, which is a shame. But Trico did give us one piece of lore that has sparked endless debates to this day. In the anime, there is an old Trico, which was basically the spark to the debate as to whether or not evolution is aging or not. So, thanks Trico for causing this never-ending debate. Yeah. At level 16, they evolve into Grovyle, a master of camouflage and moving from tree to tree. The leaves on its body make it practically invisible in the jungles, and if it is spotted, then it can swing from tree to tree at such a fast speed that basically nothing can catch it when it starts moving. They can also jump on prey from above, so that's a thing. At level 36, they evolve into Sceptile, a Pokemon covered in very sharp leaves that it can use to slice its attackers and prey. In fact, it's said that within the jungle, they have no equal, which is pretty impressive. They also have seeds on their backs that are full of nutrients that they use to care for the trees around the forest. Sceptile also has a Mega form that adds the Dragon type, but sadly, none of the Hoenn starter Megas appear in games that have entries for Mega evolutions, so we don't have any lore for them. In lack of these entries, I shall create my own lore for Mega Sceptile based on other Mega Evolution entries. Let's see. Mega Sceptile is so bursting with power that its tail is known to fall off, putting it in great pain. Yeah, that's the best I got. Moving on. Torchic is a line based on the concept of rooster fighting. I can't call it by its real name because I can't gauge the maturity of my audience. Anyway, the Hoenn Firestarter starts out as the cute little guy Torchic, which is described as being very clingy to its trainer, always following it right from behind. They also have very warm hugs, aww. However, they can also be very powerful since they have flames that reach nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At level 16, they evolve into Combuskin. This guy has gained the fighting type and spends nearly all of their time training their legs so they can be even more powerful at kicking, with them being able to deliver 10 kicks in 1 second. They're also very loud apparently, so I guess there's that. Finally, at level 36, they evolve into Blaziken. While it basically looks nothing like a chicken anymore, this is one of the most beloved starters in the post-Gen 1 games. I guess it's mostly because of the aura he gives off or something like that. Or that this was just a cool type at the time. Note that I said at the time, because trust me, we're not done with firefighting types. Anyway, when this Pokemon is in combat, flames will emit from its wrist, glowing hotter the tougher its foe is, which allows Blaziken to inflict burns on them. Its legs are also so strong they can leap 30 stories in a single bound. Also, this line is one of the strangest sexual dimorphisms. While female Combuskin and Blaziken just have shorter feathers, as is usual, male Torchic have a black speck on their butt. While at first this might just seem to be a weird graphical glitch, it has been there even on the 3D models. You might be wondering why they bothered to include such a subtle difference, but it's actually a reference to how in Japanese chicken farming, male chicks are given a black spot on their butt so that people will know that they'll become roosters when they grow up. So, yeah, it's a subtle reference to that. Okay, then. And Blaziken has a Mega form. In fact, it actually got its Mega form before the Gen 3 remakes, although it was event only. Anyway, once again, I shall make up lore for this guy, since like I said, the Hoenn starters Mega forms do not have lore. It's so fight happy that it gets hurt fighting more powerful opponents. The end. Mudkip is a cute little blue axolotl and the water starter of Hoenn. This little guy's head, fin, is a radar, able to detect anything around it without the need to actually see it. And they're also said to be able to lift boulders despite their small size. So yeah, pretty tough little dudes. At level 16, they evolve into Marsh, which is green for some reason. Anyway, now with the ground type, this guy is perfectly adapted to life in the mud. In fact, it's faster at moving through mud than it is through the water. This is thanks to its sturdy legs, making it so that they always have even footing regardless of how rough the terrain is. At level 36, they evolve into Swampert, which is blue again. Since, again, I have no idea why Marsh Stomp is green. Why is that a thing? Anyway, Swampert is capable of dragging a large ship around while swimming without even breaking a sweat. They also have very great eyesight underwater, allowing them to see clearly even in the murkiest of water. And their arms are so hard they can easily shatter boulders. Yeah, Mudkip can lift them, Swampert can shatter them. And they can even predict storms thanks to picking up differences in winds and humidity. When Swampert Mega evolves, it becomes incredibly buff. And now it's time for the last fake entry of the trio. It's perpetually on roid rage. The end. Now, you can't talk about Mudkip without talking about how it became an internet star. You see, in 2004 there was a fan group dedicated to the line, which would advertise itself by commenting, "So, I hear you like Mudkip," followed by a link to the club. This quickly became seen as hilarious to Pokemon fans, and as such, Mudkip ended up becoming a non sequitur meme that would follow unrelated posts. Sort of like the SpongeBob 62 cents copy pasta from a few years back. So yeah, Mudkip, the mimetic mudfish. The end. Hoochiana is a line based on hyenas. This Pokemon is notable for the fact that it acts as a tutorial boss in the Hoenn games, except for Emerald. Hoochiana is described as being a very persistent predator, chasing its prey until it collapses from exhaustion. However, they're also known to be quite cowardly since they'll flee at the first sign of resistance. At level 18, they evolve into Mawile, a pack hunter, which are known to savagely bite at their prey until they die. However, they're also very loyal Pokemon, and they will never disobey their alpha in the wild or their trainer when they're captured. No mention on if they're matriarchal like real hyenas, though. So yeah, the hyena Pokemon, whose evolution form looks like a 14-year-old's wolf OC. Pretty nice. The Zigzagoon line is like a hybrid between a tanuki and a badger. The Hoenn early route rodent, this guy got its name due to how it always walks in a zigzag pattern. They're also very curious, with basically anything that's new to them being seen as fascinating. At level 20, they evolve into Linoon, or Linoon, I don't know. Anyway, this guy is capable of running at speeds comparable to that of a cheetah. But they have one major flaw. They're terrible at turning around. They need to grind to a halt before they can change the angle they're running at, and because of that, they have very low prey capture rates. It's kinda sad. In the Galar region, this line is part dark type, and it's believed that these guys are the original Zigzagoons. Unlike their descendants, Galarian Zigzagoon are very aggressive, often roweling up other Pokemon just to fight them. Galarian Linoon has a long tongue that it uses to taunt enemies, even ones larger than themselves, into a fight. And they have a new form in this region. When they reach level 35 at night, they evolve into Obstagoon, who's inspired by the band Kiss. And fittingly enough for a Pokemon based on a rock band, they're described as having a very booming voice. You know, I find it interesting that this line gets more passive upon leaving their home country, since usually of introduced species, that's usually the opposite, but, oh well. moving on. Wormple can best be described as what would happen if Butterfree and Venomoth came from the same Pokémon. At first, Wormple appears to just be a simple caterpillar. It eats bark and sap while avoiding getting eaten by birds, things like that. However, at level 7, it evolves into either Cascoon or Silcoon. And you might have noticed I didn't write down how to get Wormple to evolve into these cocoons. And that's because you have absolutely no control over what Wormple evolves into. You see, Wormple's evolution is based on its personality value, which cannot be changed or even be seen without hacking. So basically, it's completely random as to what cocoon you'll get. But to make up for that, at the very least, most of the games featuring Wormple allow you to catch the cocoons directly, cutting out the middle bug entirely. As for Cascoon and Silcoon, there's not much to say here. They're just cocoons, and, we're never really given any difference between the two of them lore-wise, besides Cascoon being a bit softer than Silcoon. For, irony, I guess. When Silcoon hits level 10, it evolves into Beautifly, a savage butterfly. See, all Beautifly wants to do is drink nectar and collect pollen, and if it gets interrupted, it'll stab whatever bothered it with its needle-like mouth, sucking them of their blood. So yeah, honestly, reading the Pokedex entries of these guys reminded me of that one butterfly episode of SpongeBob. You know the episode! When Cascoon reaches level 10, it evolves into Dustox, a poisonous moth. It likes light, it releases deadly powder, and it ravages leaves. Not much to say here. Also, male Beautifly have longer spots, and female Dustox have shorter antennae, so that's a thing. Other than that, Wormple. RNG. Lotad is a sentient lily pad that has 6 legs. Lotad is mostly aquatic, with it only coming onto land in search of other bodies of water. At level 14, they evolve into Lombre, which is possibly based on Kappas, but I just assume everything with a ball on its head is based on those, so who knows. Lombre are mischievous little boogers. They love to pull pranks on fishermen by pulling at their lines and then swimming away, and they're also nocturnal. So that's a thing. When given a water stone, they evolve into Ludicolo. This Pokemon is very festive and loves dancing. In fact, dancing makes it stronger. Also, female Ludicolo have thinner stripes, so that's a thing. So yeah, not much to say here. Sentient lily pads that love to dance. Very odd line indeed. Seedot is an acorn. There's not much to talk about with this guy, since all of its Pokedex entries say is that it likes to pretend to be an inanimate nut in order to scare away other Pokemon. And also when they drink, they shine, so yeah. At level 14, they evolve into Nuzleaf, the Pokemon that has nipples for some reason. This Pokemon likes to flute around if its head leaves, which makes a sound that's known to scare people that walk through the forest. Nuzleaf is also notable for the fact that it's the partial namesake for the popular Pokemon playstyle known as the Nuzlocke, with the name stemming from a fan comic featuring a Nuzleaf who had the face of a character named Locke from that one island show. I forget what it's called. It's lost on me at the moment. I think it was called The Island Where People Got Lost. I don't know. It's lost at me at the moment what it was actually called, but maybe you guys can help me find out what it was called. Anyways, this guy became popular, and as such, gameplay that followed the rules set in the comics have been known as Nuzlocks. Back to the games. When Nuzleaf is given a Leaf Stone, it evolves into the Woody Tengu Shiftry. Pokemon that, despite not being an ice or flying type, is known to create huge cold gusts of winds that can reach 100 miles an hour. These winds are so strong they can even level houses. So yeah, the acorn that becomes a Tengu. Fun. Also, female Nuzleaf and Shiftry have shorter leaves, so yeah, that's a thing. Halo is a Swallow. This Pokemon is described as being very courageous, but also very aggressive, squeaming when they're hungry. They also hate the cold, often flying away if the weather isn't warm enough, which makes sense since they're a flying type and they're weak to ice types, so, good attention to detail there. At level 22, they evolve into Swellow. Yeah, they just changed the A to an E. Yeah. And sadly, they're one of those just the real animal Pokemon. They're just said to swoop down on prey and clean its wings. So basically just a more aggressive Swallow. Kinda lame. But then again, that's what you get when you just replace one letter. You get Pokemon like this, with lame names. You have a lame name, Swellow. Yeah. Yeah, I said it. Swellow has a lame name. What am I even saying at this point? Let's move on. Wingull is a seagull, whose V-shape could possibly be based on the stereotypical drawing of a bird just being a V-shape. Wingull can basically be described as a less annoying seagull. They spend most of their time flying through the winds and also hiding their food and collectibles in their nests, so yeah. At level 25, they evolve into Pelipper, a pelican with a massive bill that it uses both as a way to feed and as a way to transport small Pokemon and eggs. But it is mentioned that no one knows where it takes these small Pokemon to, and considering real pelicans eat anything they can put into their mouths, I don't like the implication there. Also, a small child can fit in their mouth, so keep them away from your kids. Now, I'm mostly kidding. Pelipper has always been portrayed as friendly, but still, think about it. Would you really want a pelican to hold your kid? I didn't think so. Yeah, everyone's mad at Hypno for kidnapping. Pelipper, what are you hiding? I'm getting way too upset at this fictional pelican. Let's move on before I start accusing him of other crimes, too. Here we have Ralts, a line based on the concept of guardian angels. Ralts is able to detect emotions, and its own feelings are directly tied to its trainer's emotional state. So when you're happy, they're happy. It's also said they only appear before people in good moods, so that's something to keep in mind if they ever become real. At level 20, they evolve into Curlia, whose horns give it amazing psychic abilities, which allow it to create both mirages as well as show visions of the future. It's also said that their appearance is directly tied to its trainer's emotions, with it being more beautiful the happier its trainer is, so that's nice. Now, Curly is a split evolution, so it's up to you to decide what it'll turn into. Well, partially, as I'll explain in a bit, and as you can probably tell from down there. Anyway, if Curlia reaches level 30, it'll evolve into Gardevoir. This Pokemon is very protective of its trainer, unleashing its full psychic potential if it feels like they're in danger. In fact, they've even been known to create black holes in order to protect their trainer. Oh yeah, and they can still see into the future, just in case you were wondering if they lost that power. Now, a Curlia will evolve into Gardevoir if it reaches level 30, no matter what its gender is. If you have a male Curlia, you can give it a Dawnstone, and in that situation, it'll evolve into Gallade, which swipes out its fairy type for fighting type. Yep, this is our first gender-specific evolution. They're not the most common thing in the world, since it's a little unfair to lock certain evolutions to one sex, but there's still a handful of them, and Gallade is our first one. Anyway, this Pokemon doesn't have the same phenomenal psychic power as Gardevoir, but it makes up for that thanks to it being a master swordsman with blades in its arms that are sharper than the best swords man has ever made. In addition, while they lack the pure psychic power of Gardevoir, they can still read minds, making it easy for them to dodge their foes' attacks. They're also a very honorable species as they only use their impressive skills as defense, never as a provocation. Both Gardevoir and Gallade also both have Mega Evolutions, but they don't have any lore about them, just like the starters. So you know what that means! Mega Gardevoir can destroy planets, and Mega Gallade's cape is slowly strangling its brain in order to make it more powerful. That's the best I got. Gen 9 also gives us the Pokemon Iron Valiant, which notably enough, looks like a hybrid between both Gardevoir and Gallade. Which is interesting, but sadly, like every other Paradox Pokemon, they don't have any lore. It just says they look like a creature from a magazine. Disappointing. So yeah, the Green Guardians that the internet loves. How neat. Surskit is a Pokemon that completely wasted its cool type combo. This water strider has oil covering its legs, allowing it to glide across the water. They can also release a sweet smelling liquid from their head that has two purposes. One, it draws in microscopic life forms that it preys upon, and two, it tastes foul to most flying types, allowing it to not get eaten. But this liquid is edible to humans and is even a popular bread topping. So, instead of jelly, you put Surskit juice. Now, the idea of eating something from a water strider sounds pretty cursed, but then again, I guess honey is basically bee vomit, so I forget where I was going with this analogy. Anyway, Surskit is a bug water type, which is a pretty good type combo, since they both cover at least one weakness of each other. Water neutralizes fire, and bug neutralizes grass, so a fully evolved bug water type would actually be pretty good. But no, that's not what we get. At level 22, Surskit evolves into Mascarin, which is bug flying, aka the most cliched bug type in the whole series. Yay! Anyway, now they can fly. Good for them, I guess. And they have spots on their wings that look like eyes, kind of like those butterflies, so, yeah, and they can fly as good as a helicopter. Yeah, that's all I got. Even Sun and Moon, which usually give us the most detailed accounts of Pokemon, they just repeat the four eyes, good at flying thing, with the only new information being given is that it doesn't like flying in high moisture environments. Cool. Sadly, because they just had to ruin this cool typing, we would have to wait 4 more generations for this combo to be fully utilized properly. So, be patient. Roomish is an odd little fellow. This walking mushroom likes damp forests where it can feed on rotten plants, and if it's threatened, it'll release spores from its head that cause whatever inhales them to experience great pain all over their body. These spores can also kill plants on contact, which is probably good for them considering their diet. At level 23, they evolve into Breloom. Now part fighting type, this guy is in the shape of a kangaroo, and it even moves by hopping. I don't know where they got the idea for a kangaroo mushroom, but the fact that it's part fighting type is a reference to the boxing kangaroo tourist attraction, where they would put boxing gloves on a kangaroo and have him fight a guy. Yes, that's something that really happened, and it's why so many cartoon kangaroos wear boxing gloves, just in case you were curious. Anyway, this Pokemon has stretchy arms, and in combat, it'll first stun its prey with its spores, before attacking with its incredibly fast, stretchy arms that are thrown at speeds that make them invisible. So yeah, the mushroom that becomes a kangaroo. Still one of the strangest concepts this series has created. Slackoff Lime gives us our first Pokemon to be defined by their abilities. Starting out as the cute little sloth, Slackoff. This is a very lazy Pokemon, which is fitting considering what it's based on. Slackoffs do not move at all for 20 hours of the day, and they don't even really need to eat all that much. Just 3 leaves and they're good to go. They're so slow, in fact, that their heart only beats once a minute, and when it moves, it doesn't even look like it's doing anything. And this slowness is reflected in this line's infamous signature ability, Truant. This is an ability that causes the user to not be able to do anything every other turn. So, basically, you attack one turn, then you have to skip the next turn. But guess what? It's not just attacks either. If you do anything on your turn, then Truant will activate. Doesn't matter if you attack or not. You wake up, Truant activates. You flinch, Truant activates. You know, the fact that I said if you flinch, Truant activates sounds like a joke to people who don't play Pokemon, but, yeah, flinching's a game mechanic. Look it up. At level 18, Slackoff will evolve into Vigoroth, who is like the polar opposite of Slackoff. While Slackoff barely moves, Vigoroth has a hard time stopping itself from moving. In fact, it gets stressed out if it can't move. Slackoff's heart beats slowly, Vigoroth has an incredibly speedy heartbeat. Slackoff only needs to eat 3 leaves, Vigoroth is basically always hungry due to its high metabolism. Notably, Vigoroth does not have the Truant ability, instead it has an ability known as Vital Spirit, which makes any Pokemon that has it impossible to put to sleep. That came out wrong. Okay, that came out wrong. I mean, like, you know, be lulled into sleep. You're not committing old yellow, aren't you? Okay, what am I? Okay, stop, sorry. Okay, stop talking. Okay. Level 36, Vigoroth will evolve into Slacking, the ultimate double-edged sword. Described as the world's laziest Pokemon, Slacking only moves when it runs out of food in its immediate reach. They spend most of their day just eating the grass that grows around them until it's gone, at which point they move to another grassy area. They also like to eat fruit, as when trees start to bear them, groups of them will lie under the tree waiting for the fruit to ripen and fall. However, Slacking hides a very deadly secret. You see, Slacking has stats that rival legendaries, and if agitated enough, they will release a power that's described as horrifying. So yeah, double-edged sword, because on the one hand, fantastic stats, but on the other hand, it has Truant again. Because of this, there's a lot of debate as to if you should get Slacking or not, if it's worth it, you know, or if you should just stick to Vigoroth. I really don't care since I'm not a competitive fighter, but hey, how about you tell me your thoughts if you ever raise this line? Nincada is a cicada that spends all of its time underground sucking the nutrients from tree roots. Because of their subterranean lifestyle, they're basically blind, and they use their antenna to look around. So yeah, pretty typical cicada stuff. At level 20, Nincada will evolve into Ninjask, a ninja cicada, a Pokemon that's said to be so fast that for the longest time, people thought it had the ability to turn invisible. Now, while it has a hard time being seen, they can be heard, as the noises they make are so loud that they can cause headaches. Wait, isn't that just what cicadas are already like? Never mind. Also, they still love sap, in case you were wondering. Now, Ninjask is a bug flying type instead of bug ground, but I'm honestly not torn up as much as I am with the waste of bug water. Mostly because I don't really care about the ground type that much. but also I can forgive it because of this line's unique gimmick. If you're a more casual fan of Pokemon, you might have noticed that there's no arrow pointing to the bottom Pokemon. That guy is Shedinja, and the reason why it's not being pointed to is because it's not really an evolution. Rather, it's more like a bonus Pokemon. You see, when Nincada evolves, if you have an extra slot in your party and an empty Pokeball, then when the process of evolution happens, you will have both a Ninjask as well as a Shedinja. A bug ghost type, Shedinja is an empty husk of a shell left behind upon evolution that somehow gains sentience. Yeah, it's been mentioned that even in universe nobody knows what's going on with these things. Also, Shedinja has a hole on its back that it's said that if you look into, it'll steal your soul, so watch out. Also, they're still capable of breeding, which I do not want to think about. Regardless, the most interesting part about Shedinja comes at how it operates in battle. You see, they only have a single hit point. Yep, just one, and you can't increase it. But to make up for that fact, they possess the ability Wonder Guard, which makes it so that they can only be hit by moves that would do super effective damage. So yeah, depending on its opponent, Shedinja can either be a complete joke or an unkillable god. Well now, a cicada that becomes a ninja while creating an unstoppable force. Very odd. Whismur is a Pokemon that has a butthole. I'm not joking about that, by the way. Anyway, this Pokemon and its evolutions are based on amplifiers, which is fitting considering how these Pokemon specialized in sound-based attacks. When it's a Whismur, they're very timid Pokemon that mostly emit noises so quiet that they can't even be heard when up close. However, if they feel threatened, then they will let out a scream that's as loud as a jet engine. And even worse, once they start, they basically don't stop as the sound of their screaming freaks them out again, which just makes them scream louder. Usually, when they start screaming, they only stop because they knock themselves out from exhaustion. Luckily, though, it's so that if you plug their ears, then they'll stop, so keep that in mind if you ever have one as a pet. On level 20, they evolve into Loudred, which has speakers for ears, which aren't just for show, because when this Pokemon screams, those speakers act as amplifiers, and this Pokemon's voice is so powerful it can knock down a house and tip over a semi-truck. However, one weakness is that whenever it screams, it temporarily loses its hearing, making it easy to sneak up on. At level 40, they evolve into Exploud, a Pokemon so loud that it's capable of shaking the ground in a way described as being similar to an earthquake. Luckily, though, they only scream in battle. When they're not, they instead communicate with each other using strange noises made of the holes on its body. It's also said that in older days, people would use Exploud as a way to send messages from far away since they can be heard from over 6 miles away. So yeah, the living amps. How cute. Still don't know why Whismur has a butthole. Makohita is a sentient punching bag that practices sumo wrestling. Like most first form fighting types, they're still training in this stage. Makuhita training involves slamming into trees over and over again in order to increase their endurance. They're also very tenacious, never giving up no matter how many times it gets knocked out. It's also mentioned that they're famous in Alola despite not being native there, which is a little adorable, not gonna lie. At level 24, they evolve into Hariyama. This Pokemon is famous for its deadly open palm strikes, which can send 10-ton trucks flying. They also love to fight big Pokemon. However, they're not an aggressive species, as they're known to be very complementary to their opponents, and it's mentioned that when they get old, they spend all their time training Makuhitas. Aww. In Gen 9, we were given the Paradox Pokemon Iron Hands, which is like a robotic Hariyama that's also part electric type. But once again, all we get is that it looks like a creature in a magazine. You know, I was disappointed when I first read Paradox Pokemon entries, because alternate forms and Mega Evolutions always have these cool little lore tidbits about how they came into existence, but every single Paradox Pokemon entry is exactly the same. It's just like, oh, we barely know anything, and it looks like it's from a magazine. Ugh, so disappointing. That's a rant for another time, though. Let's just move on. Nosepass is a magnetic Easter Island head. Like real magnets, they are always facing north and they cannot directly touch each other due to magnetic repellent. It's implied that they eat steel types since it's said that their prey are whatever they can magnetize, and I think we all know there's only one Pokemon type that could apply to. They also gather matter around themselves for protection, but this magnetism does have the unfortunate side effect of also being able to draw on their predators, so when leveled up in a highly magnetic area, Nosepass will evolve into Probopass. which now has a mustache made out of magnetic sand. And also those eyes that I don't think anyone likes. Probopass is a master of magnetism, being capable of manipulating both its mustache as well as the three smaller noses around it that are known as mini noses. Yeah, not the most creative name, but it fits. Which it can send out in order to gather prey without ever needing to move or wait for something to come by. So yeah, magnetic moe. Definitely an out there concept, but there's also been weirder, so whatever. Sadly, there's not much to say about the Skitty line besides their appearance. Skitty is a pink cat that has a cattail-like tail. When it's given a moonstone, it evolves into Delketty, which, as I said when I was talking about Clefairy, I'm not sure if a moonstone implies something's extraterrestrial because Clefairy is the only Pokemon that evolves with it that's stated to be extraterrestrial, but, I don't want to get into this debate again. Now, the reason I'm breezing through them is because all their Pokedex entries basically just describe them as being very much like our cats. They're curious and they like to chase their own things and they're popular pets. So yeah, there's not really much to say with this line. Well, except for Skitty, because it's involved in one of the most infamous aspects of the games. But we'll get to that when we get to the other Pokemon involved in that equation. So, let's just move on for now. Skitty's adorable, it just doesn't have much to say. For now, at least. Sableye is a very interesting Pokemon. Based on the Hopkinsville Goblin sightings, this guy has the typing of Ghost and Dark, which before Fairy type was introduced, was a combo that had no weaknesses. Sableye spends its time in caves where it eats its favorite food, gemstones. These guys love gemstones so much that it's said that their eyes are the result of how much they eat the stuff. And the gems they eat also float up on their back, which creates a bunch of patterns all over it. But this isn't reflected in gameplay, where they all have the same back sprite consisting of a ruby, sapphire, and emerald. Wait a minute. Anyway, Sableye is also pretty feared by people due to how it's believed that if you look them in the eye, they will steal your soul. So watch out unless you want to see if that's true. Sableye also has a Mega Evolution, which actually is a Pokedex entry, thank goodness. In this form, the gem on its chest rips out and expands, giving it a great wall for defense, but also making it harder for them to turn around, leaving it with a pretty big blind spot, so kind of a double-edged sword. Overall, pretty freaky Pokemon based on a pretty obscure legend. Pretty nice. Mawile is a Pokemon resembling a woman with a Venus flytrap on their head. This might seem like a strange concept at first, but they're actually based on a Japanese yokai known as Fudakuchi Onna, a woman with two mouths, one in the front of the head and one in the back. Anyway, this flytrap mouth is said to have evolved from stationary horns that eventually turn into a powerful set of chompers. This Pokemon hunts by luring other Pokemon into a false sense of security by only revealing their seemingly harmless looking face at first. And once their guard is down, Mawile clamps on them with its powerful jaws that can cut through steel, with them swallowing their prey whole. This mouth is also said to have no sense of taste, so they use it to eat things they hate the taste of. I think we could all use something like that. When Mawile Mega evolves, it gains a second set of jaws. These two mouths seem to have a mind of their own, and they viciously attack prey by tearing them to pieces, and their chomp can even turn boulders to dust. So yeah, Flytrap Girl, watch out. Line is based on a Korean monster known as the Bulgasari, which grows whenever it eats metal. Aaron has similar attributes, as they also eat metal, which gives them a coat made out of the stuff. In addition, they mostly eat iron ore for sustenance, but sometimes they leave the mountains in search of food, where they come across man-made structures that they proceed to devour, which as you can imagine, is kinda bad, especially if they eat a bridge or a railroad. At level 32, they evolve into Laren, which, when it evolves, they shed their old armor, which people often take in order to recycle it. Laren still has a diet of steel, but it also loves mineral water, often making its home close to bodies of this stuff. They're also territorial, as if another Laren enters their turf, they'll slam against each other until one of them leaves. They also have to get into fights with miners who, mine for steel, so that's a pretty big workplace hazard. Interestingly, it's never said that they leave the mountains for food, so I guess it's just easier for them to harvest steel now that they're so strong. At level 42, they evolve into Aggron, which looks like a kaiju. But I guess that's fitting, considering that Bulgasari are most famous for being in a kaiju movie, so, Aggron looking like a kaiju makes sense. If you thought Laren was territorial, just wait, because Aggron claims entire mountains as its territory. and it'll beat up anything that violates its turf. In addition, the holes on its armor are actually scars from battles they previously had, and they're so strong that they can burrow right through solid bedrock. Aggron also has a Mega Evolution, which is rather notably pure Steel type, making this the only Pokemon that becomes a Solo type when they Mega Evolve. And once again, they have no lore, so here we go. Uh, it lacks emotions, and it'll kill even its closest friends. Yeah, that's what I got. So yeah, the Metal Kaiju. Pretty metal. Why aren't you laughing? Meditite is a Pokemon that practices yoga and meditation, as you could probably tell by their name. And like most first form fighting types, they're still training when they're in this stage. These Pokemon intentionally eat as little as possible in order to starve themselves, which helps them increase their spirit. In addition, they always practice yoga once a day, followed by a period of meditation. At level 37, they evolve into Medicham. All the training has caused Medicham to gain a sort of sixth sense where they're able to accurately predict their opponent's next move. These Pokemon have also gone for months without eating, since starvation stimulates their mind, giving them powerful clairvoyance. So yeah, very endurant Pokemon. Is that even a word? I don't care. Medicham also has a Mega Evolution, which has no lore. Okay, let's see. The tendrils on its back are constantly spanking it in order to heighten its mental power, but it's unable to eat. If I have to do one more of these, I'm gonna break something. Also, males this line have higher ears and shorter head feathers. Cool. Well, it took us 3 generations, but we finally have a wolf Pokemon. Actually, that's not that long. Just wait till you see how long it took other famous animals to get a Pokemon. Anyway, Electrike is a green wolf with bolts going down its neck. These Pokemon are so fast that they're invisible to the human eye. This is thanks to how the static built up in their body stimulates their muscles into becoming super fast. In fact, it's said that they have so much static in them that it makes a crackling sound whenever they run. Surprisingly, though, despite being a wolf, there's no mention of them being pack hunters. Anyways, at level 26, they evolve into Manectric, which doesn't really have all that much to say. It's mostly just a lot of repeating the static fur and fast movement thing. They're just a lot better at discharging the fur, I guess. So, yeah. Still no mention of pack hunting, interestingly enough. Manectric also has a Mega Evolution, which thankfully has lore. According to the Dex, this Pokemon is enveloped by its mane, and it's filled with so much electricity that it can't handle it all, which irritates it. So yeah, the electric wolves that don't hunt in packs. Yay. Plusle and Minon are an example of what's known as Pika clones. In every generation of Pokemon, there's a Pokemon that looks suspiciously similar to Pikachu. In Gen 2, it was considered Pichu, which is actually a relative of Pikachu, so I didn't bring it up there. And in this generation, we got 2 of them, in Plusle and Minon. These 2 Pokemon have the abilities Plus and Minus respectively, which gives them a stat boost if their opposite is on the same team. Plusle is positively charged, while Minon is negatively charged. So when together, they end up being fully charged, or something like that. Personality-wise, these 2 are very cheerful Pokemon that love cheering on their friends by creating sparkly pom-poms. They also love eating electricity from foam poles, so I'm sure they're fun to have around in cities. So yeah, the Pika clone duo. Not much to say here. Volbeat and Ilumis are such missed opportunities when it comes to typing. These 2 fireflies are technically considered different species in the Pokedex, but it's pretty obvious that they're male and female versions of each other. In fact, if they breed together, the eggs they make can either contain Volbeat or Ilumis, whereas if other Pokemon breed outside their species, then the baby will always be the mother species. So yeah, they're the same Pokemon, they just got separated, probably to show off the double battle system or whatever. Volbeat fly around at night, flashing their lights in order to communicate with each others, but they often get distracted by the aroma given off by Illuminae, who can attract large groups of Volbeats at a time with this scent. Once the males are twitter-pated, they follow the Illumies around the night sky, creating strange patterns, which are still being studied as to what they mean. So yeah, fireflies that are love bugs, but not literally, because that would require fusing themselves together. Anyway, I call them a missed opportunity for a typing because they should have been bug electric. I mean, fireflies are also called lightning bugs. It was right there, and they didn't even take it. Strangely enough, they're not even bug flying either, despite having wings, so this is one Pokemon whose solo typing makes no sense. Either make it bug electric or at least bug flying. Why is it just pure bug? I don't get it. Okay, that's enough. Let's move on. I've spent more time thinking about these two than most people probably have in their entire life. Rosalia is a strange Pokemon, not because of lore or anything like that, but rather because in Gen 3 it was a single stage Pokemon, but then Gen 4 gave it not only an evolution, but also a baby form. I can understand the evolution part, but what's the point of giving it a baby form? Actually, I can ask that about basically any baby form, so whatever. The first Pokemon in this line is Badoo. This bud Pokemon hates the cold and spends all winter with its bud firmly tight. However, when spring arrives, they release pollen from their head, which acts like real pollen, in that it's an annoying irritant that causes people misery by making them constantly sneeze. So that's fun. At high friendship during the day, they evolve into Rosalia. This Pokemon has hands consisting of a red and blue rose that have a lovely aroma to them, especially when they're healthy. However, as they say, every rose has its thorn, and Rosalias are full of deadly poison, and they can even shoot them at things that are threatening them, so be careful when you're flower picking. When given a shiny stone, they evolve into Roserade. Now with full bouquets on its hand, this Pokemon is a predator, using the sweet smell of its flowers in order to lure in smaller Pokemon to them before they strike with poisonous whips in order to kill them. So yeah, the one-off that became a family whose evolution is a carnivorous rose. I don't know what else to say. Also, it took me way too long to realize that Roserade's hair is a white rose. I don't know why that took me so long to realize. Also, females of this line have longer leaves. Cool. Coolpin is a sentient stomach. This thing is an eating machine capable of eating things that are the same size as them in just a single bite. And thanks to their powerful stomach acid, they can digest anything. While they do this, they also release deadly gases. Yeah, I think we've all been there, buddy. At level 26, they evolve into Swalot, which is even more ravenous of its diet since they can now eat pars. They're also constantly sweating toxic fluids, and when they come across something living that they want to eat, they spit acid at them in order to incapacitate them first. So yeah, not much else to say here, just sentient stomachs. Also, females have shorter feathers and whiskers, respectively. Carvana is pretty clearly inspired by piranhas, and they're basically portrayed like how piranhas are always portrayed in media. They swim in massive storms that are very territorial if anything enters their waters, and when they do, the school will rip it to shreds. They also have very powerful teeth, so not even boats are safe from this. However, they're also described as being very cowardly Pokemon, so that's kind of accurate to real life. Piranhas are pretty timid. At level 30, they evolve into Sharpedo, which resembles a shark mixed of a sunfish. Now, I've heard people say this evolution is weird, but it kinda makes me nostalgic in a way. Since when I was a kid, I thought piranhas were baby sharks. Yes, really. Interestingly enough, though, it's always mentioned that Carvana live in rivers while Sharpedo lives out in the sea, which makes me believe that Sharpedo breed like salmon, but that's just a theory. Sharpedos are very fast and very strong, with their bodies designed in a way to decrease drag, allowing them to burst through the water at speeds of over 70 miles an hour. But much like a cheetah, they don't have the best stamina, so they can't do this for very long. Their bite is also so strong they can rip right through sheet iron. Sadly, though, much like real sharks, Sharpedo are hunted for their fins, so they are often overhunted, decreasing their numbers. Sharpedo also has a megaform, which is covered in spikes that are actually its teeth. And it's covered in scars from previous battles, which is odd because this is a temporary form, making me wonder where the scars came from. Also, they're full of energy that causes great suffering. So yeah, another victim of energy overdosing. How sad. Whalmer is a very spherical whale. This Pokemon is very playful, with it liking to scare people by sneaking up on them and then spouting water at them. They can also temporarily live on land by filling themselves up with water and bouncing along the ground. It's also mentioned that, like real whales, they evolved from terrestrial animals. At level 40, they evolve into Wailord, the largest non-legendary Pokemon. At nearly 50 feet long, these whales swim in pods and are capable of diving to depths of nearly 10,000 feet, which is just a few shy of how deep sperm whales have been recorded as going. And like real whales, they eat large amounts of small Pokemon at once, and if a Wailord is attacked, then its whole pod will protect it. Now with Wailord, one infamous fact about it is the fact that it's able to breed with very tiny Pokemon. You see, Wailord is in both the Water 2 egg group, which consists of Pokemon that are either fish or fish-like whales and dolphins, and more importantly, the Field egg group, which is a group mostly consisting of Pokemon based on mammals, which, being a whale, Wailord is. And you know who else is in the Field egg group? Skitty. Yep, I told you I'd get back to this. Yes, Skitty and Wailord can breed together, despite Wailord being 20 times their size. And it's not just Skitty either. Wailord can breed with a lot of Pokemon way smaller than them, with some of them not even being a foot long. They can even breed with the Gen 7 Pokemon Wishy-Washy, which is literally their prey. But believe it or not, that's not even the only time in these games that you can breed predators and prey together. It's a surprisingly common thing. So yeah, RIP any Pokemon left of Wailord in a daycare. Namo is a fiery camel. Unlike real camels whose humps are full of fat, a Numel's hump is full of magma that it can use to boost its flame-based attacks. However, because it has a hole in its back, rain can easily get in their hump, hardening the lava and slowing them down. So they gotta be careful out there. At level 33, they evolve into Camerupt, who I always thought looked more like a cow than a camel. Anyway, instead of humps, it has two volcanoes on its back made from its bones, and when they're mad, they will erupt. Literally. They also erupt on their own every 10 years or so that's a thing. There's also Mega Camerupt, which is one of the weirder choices for a Mega Evolution, since the sign isn't very popular from what I can tell, since most Pokemon with 4 times weaknesses are considered pretty trash. If I had to guess, I'd say the only reason they gave this guy a Mega Evolution is just because it was the main Pokemon of one of the final bosses of this generation, so they wanted something climactic to end off with in the remakes, but that's just my theory. Anyway, I'm stalling because they were never given any lore. Here we go again. It lost its immunity to lava and it's slowly melting. There. Also, females of this line have shorter humps, so that's a thing. Okay, is Gen 3 just a generation of confusing types because, this guy, despite having rocks on his back and being themed around coal, which is a rock, is a pure fire type. Anyway, Torkel is a pyrokinetic tortoise that is fueled by coal, which it spends all day looking for. In fact, they're sort of like trains in a way. If they ever run out of something to combust, they'll die. So the Pokedex says to always have something flammable ready to feed them. They can also release black soot as a defense mechanism in a similar way to how squids release ink. You know, I have to wonder if in the Pokemon world people still use coal as power and if there's protests saying we shouldn't have it so that the Torkels don't starve. Definitely something to think about. Spoink is a Pokemon that would be completely forgotten about if it weren't for its disturbing Pokedex entry. This line consists of psychic pigs covered in pearls, which is a reference to the biblical saying of casting pearls before swines, which is basically a saying referring to giving something to someone who doesn't even know why they should appreciate it. Since after all, pigs have no sense of money, so they wouldn't care about pearls. I'm getting off topic. Anyway, Spoink is a pig that is constantly bouncing on its tail like a spring. They have a pearl on their head that amplifies their psychic power, which they stole from the Pokemon Clamperl. More on him later. And oh yeah, if they ever stop bouncing, then their heart will stop. Yes, really, their heart only pumps because of the shock given off by their recoil from jumping. Jeez, imagine not being able to stop moving or you die. Oh wait, that's already the world sharks live in. Never mind. At level 32, they evolve into Grumpig, which doesn't have to keep jumping anymore, so that's a positive. This Pokemon is covered in black pearls that boost its power, and it's constantly dancing strange, weird dances. So yeah, not much to say here. Like I said, if it weren't for the heart-stopping thing being featured in a bunch of those weird, clickbaity, disturbing Pokedex entries, weird Pokemon secrets, things like that videos, then this line would probably be completely forgotten about in all honesty. Spinda's a Pokemon with an absolutely insane gimmick. This red panda, as in a panda that is red, not a red panda as in the animal. Anyway, it's perpetually dizzy, but it doesn't even realize this as it thinks that it's always walking in a straight line. However, they do get nauseous if they walk too far. It's never mentioned why they constantly spin, but it's said that their spinning helps them avoid attacks, so maybe that's the reason, I don't know. But the more notable thing about Spinda is in its markings. You see, thanks to a special rendering system, or something like that, I forget exactly how this works, Spinda has over 3 billion possible spot arrangements. And if you take its shiny form into account, then that number doubles. So yeah, that's a lot of Spinda. So much, in fact, that I'm genuinely curious as to if there are Spinda patterns that have never been seen in gameplay. Definitely something to wonder. So yeah, the drunk panda that's like a snowflake. One of the stranger things this series has made. Trapinch is a line based on antlines, and unlike most other media, this one actually remembers that those cones are only built by their larvae, so way to go. Anyway, Trapinch, like the previously mentioned antlions, makes cones in the sand where they wait for other creatures to walk by and fall into their traps so they can eat them. And they eat a lot more than ants, especially considering that we wouldn't actually get an ant Pokemon for 2 more generations, so they have a lot more varied of a diet. At level 35, they evolve into Bravia, which, despite having wings, is not very good at flying. As such, they only use their wings for hunting, since when they rub their wings together, they're capable of creating ultrasonic noises, which stun prey long enough to eat them. And finally, at level 45, they evolve into Flygon. This Pokemon is capable of creating sandstorms with its wing flaps, and the noise it makes when flying is said to sound like a woman singing, which has apparently led to many broken-hearted people thinking they found love. So yeah. Also in Alola, they have a sort of symbiotic relationship with the Gen 5 Pokemon Crocodile, where they use their sandstorm creation to hide the dial so they can hunt without being detected, and upon killing of the prey, the dragon and crocodile share the bounty. Now, Flygon is an example of what I like to call a pseudo-legendary. They're basically Pokemon that seem like they could be a pseudo-legendary, but they're not officially considered one, probably because its first stage is in Dragon type. Another thing to note is that Flygon rather infamously never got a Mega Evolutions, despite being one of the most wanted Pokemon to get one. Now, they actually did consider it, but they couldn't find a design for it, and when that news got out, it upset a lot of people. And now, the final thing I have to say here. Why is this guy not Bug Dragon? You have had 2 chances now, Game Freak. Well, I mean, this was technically the first chance, and Yan Mega was the second, but regardless, why are they so afraid of using this type combo? There are 2 different Pokemon who this combo would be perfect for, but no, they decided not to do it, which is lame. I'd honestly love to hear a good justification as to why this combo hasn't been used. If you can think of a reason, I'd love to hear it. Cacnea is a Pokemon based on barrel cacti. Fittingly, they live in deserts and rarely need to drink. In order to feed, they release a pleasant aroma from the flower on their head, which attracts other Pokemon to them. When they arrive, they get skewered, and then they get eaten. Level 22, they evolve into Cacturn, which now looks like a scarecrow. During the day, this Pokemon remains completely motionless, but at night, they strike. Packs of Cacturn have been known to follow hikers around, biding their time until they end up collapsing from exhaustion, whereupon they strike. Yep, Cacturn stalks other creatures and strikes when they're on the brink of death from exhaustion. How lovely. So yeah, these are definitely cacti you'd want to avoid. And also female Cacturn have a larger middle spike, so that's a thing. Swablu is a bird of very fluffy wings. Now, they might look like they're made of clouds, but it's been confirmed that they're just really fluffy feathers. These guys are total neat freaks, not being able to stand if their immediate area is dirty. They also have the strange habit of always landing on people's heads and acting like a hat. At level 35, they evolve into the even fluffier bird Altaria, which is now part dragon type instead of normal. Yeah, Gen 3 was the generation where they finally stopped nickel and diming the ghost and dragon types. In Gen 1, both types only got a single line consisting of 3 Pokemon. Then in Gen 2, they only got 1 Pokemon each. But from here on out, they're finally given a lot more per generation, so that's a good thing. Anyway, this Pokemon has a lovely singing voice, and it's often seen dancing high up in the air where it looks like a big fluffy cloud. In addition, if they like someone, then they will give them a big fluffy hug. Aww. Now, I'm definitely not the first person to say this, but Altaria's dragon type is a bit confusing. It doesn't look draconic, and none of its dex entries describe it as being very draconic, so I don't get why it's a dragon type. But again, I'm sure I'm like the 3 millionth person to make that statement. Altaria also has a Mega Evolution, where the flying type is swapped for Fairy, but once again it has no lore, so let's see. The Fairy and Dragon type within it are fighting and it's in constant pain. The end. So yeah, the fluffy bird Pokemon. Now these 2 Pokemon are not relatives, but they're so intertwined with each other that you really can't talk about one without mentioning the other. Zangoose and Survivor are a mongoose and a snake respectively, with a bitter rivalry going back centuries. Zangoose are equipped with deadly claws and great agility in order to dodge the snake's fast bite. Normally a quadruped, when they sense a Survivor, they get on their hind legs and assume an attack position. Zangoose has been battling Survivor for so long, in fact, that they're immune to getting poisoned, which is reflected in their ability, Immunity, which makes them immune from the poison status effect, which is normally only resisted by other poison types and steel types. As for Survivor, it has a very sharp tip on its tail that it's able to inject whatever it slashes with venom, as well as a sharp weapon to compete with Zangoose's claws. They can also sharpen it like a sword in order to make it even deadlier. So yeah, these two Pokemon have had a blood feud going on for generations with no sign of it ever stopping. However, because both of them are in the Field Egg group, because for some reason, in addition to mammalian Pokemon, the Field Egg group also has Pokemon based on snakes, Zangoose and Survivor are capable of making babies. Sadly, because a lot of kids are watching, I can't use the term I want to use here, so let's just move on. Lunatone and Soulrock are Pokemon shaped like the Sun and Moon that aren't in Sun and Moon. Great. As you can tell by being shaped like celestial objects, these guys are thought to be extraterrestrials, which is supported by the fact that Lunatone was first discovered near a meteor. Regardless of origin, both these two Pokemon have abilities related to the object they're shaped as. Lunatone gets more powerful the more full the moon is, while Soulrock absorbs sunlight in order to create bright lights and create flames. Lunatone gives off an aura of fear, while Soulrock is able to detect emotions. So yeah, the original Sun and Moon Pokemon. Why weren't they in Sun and Moon? This will always bother me. They were right there, and yet they were like, no, let's not put the Sun and Moon Pokemon in Sun and Moon. Like, what the heck? Ugh. Let's just move on. Barboach is a catfish. This guy is an ambush predator, hiding in the mud with its whiskers above the sand, waiting for prey to pass by. And when it does, it strikes. They're also very slimy, which helps them give predators the slip if they get grabbed. However, because humans love to be challenged, there are actually contests where people compete to see how many they can catch with just their bare hands. So that's a thing, I guess. At level 30, they evolve into Wishcash, the Pokemon immune to Master Balls. This guy is very territorial, claiming entire ponds for themselves, and if anything breaks that territory, they'll cause earthquakes that can reach 3 miles away. It's also mentioned that they have the ability to predict naturally occurring earthquakes as well, and they're also very gluttonous, eating anything that moves. Now, while catfish causing earthquakes might seem like a weird idea at first, it's actually based on a Japanese monster called the Namazu, which is a giant catfish imprisoned by chains that causes earthquakes whenever it flashes about. So yeah, pretty cool little folklore reference right there. You know, in the Pokemon world, if someone gets tricked on an online dating profile, do you think they call it barbroaching or wish caching? Orpish is a crawfish. These Pokemon are very hardy creatures, able to thrive in even the dirtiest of waters. Also, if they pinch something, they will never let it go. But the most notable thing about Corphish is the fact that they're an invasive species. Nobody knows where they came from, since regardless of region, it's mentioned that they're not native there. Rather, they were pets that got released into the wild and populated due to their hardiness. So where they came from, nobody knows. At level 30, they evolve into Crawdunt. But before we get into its dex entries, we need to address its appearance. Crawdunt bears a weird resemblance to Sharpedo, with the biggest giveaway being the star on its head. Now, this isn't brought up much, but I do remember watching a video once that brought up the theory that since Corphish is an invasive species, maybe Crawdaunt wasn't its original evolution, but rather a form it took on to ape Sharpedo as a sort of defense mechanism from predators. It's an interesting theory, but the resemblance has never been brought up in gameplay, so who knows. Anyway, Crawdaunt is a very aggressive Pokemon, always picking fights with others, even throwing other Pokemon out of their ponds. It's also mentioned that unlike other crustacean Pokemon, their meat is disgusting, so people don't eat them. So yeah, these are some crawfish you don't want to bring to a boil. Baltoy is a sentient top. This very old Pokemon is said to have been created by ancient civilizations as a non-sapient toy, but exposure to an unknown type of ray caused them to gain sentience. Like a top, these Pokemon exclusively move by spinning around, and they have a great sense of balance, obviously, being able to stay perfectly upright even when they're asleep. They're also a very social Pokemon, as when they come together, they will start creating loud noises, so that's a thing. At level 36, they evolve into Claydol, now covered in eyes all over their head, and beaks for some reason. I've never understood what those are supposed to be. This Pokemon moves using its telekinetic abilities, allowing it to float and move objects. Oh yeah, they also melt in water, so that's fun. So yeah, the clay guys who really make me question the whole Porygon being the first artificial Pokemon thing. Lileep is a funny-looking Pokemon based on crinoids, or sea lilies, which is an odd choice for a fossil Pokemon since sea lilies are still alive. But then again, Kabuto was partially based on horseshoe crabs, and those are also still around, so I guess living fossils are also eligible to be the origin of a fossil Pokemon. These guys come from the root fossil, and they went extinct 100 million years ago, which was during the Cretaceous. These guys spend all their time anchored to a rock waiting for prey to swim by. When they do, they clamp their tentacles onto them and swallow them whole. At level 40, they evolve into Cradily. Unlike the sedimentary Lileep, Cradily actively walks on the seafloor in search of food to ensnare with its tentacles. They can even dig into the sand to uncover prey during times of low tide. And much like a spider, they dissolve their prey before slurping them up. Because for some reason, Lileep can eat solid food, but Cradily can't. I don't get it. It's also contradicted, too, since some Pokedex entries still say they eat prey whole, so I don't know who to believe here. So yeah, the sea lilies. How lovely. That pun made no sense. Anorith is based on the Anomalocaris, aka the first super predator. Revived from the claw fossil, this guy is sadly one of those just their real animal Pokemon. Or I guess since we're dealing with an extinct animal, what we think the creature was like Pokemon. They're described as predators that ensnare their prey with their front claws and they flew through the water with their side flaps. Interestingly enough, though, all of its dex entries state that they're an ancestor to bug-type Pokemon. So much like how Anomalocaris was the first super predator, it's possible Anorith was one of the very first non-legendary Pokemon to exist. Also, unlike Ammonite, who managed to thrive in modern times, Anorith are only found in captivity because water has changed so much since, presumably the Cambrian, that they just can't live in it. At level 40, they evolve into Armaldo, who looks like if Sid the Sloth from Ice Age was a crustacean. Anyway, if this line is indeed from the Cambrian like their inspiration is, then Armaldo would be ahead of the curve, since their build is adapted for life on land. Not sure what they would do up there, since this is before anything went on land, but hey, way to be ahead of the curve. Their claws are also a lot deadlier, being capable of cutting through solid steel. So yeah, the odd shrimp that managed to be ahead of the curve evolution-wise. Congratulations. Feebas is like Magikarp but ridiculously harder to obtain. Feebas is often considered to be the ugliest Pokemon. At least in universe, there are plenty of Pokemon that real people find a lot uglier. But anyway, this Pokemon is very hardy and can live basically anywhere as long as there's water. Their ugliness is also a defense mechanism, as most predators just take one look at them and assume they taste awful. Now, as for the whole hard to obtain thing, let me explain. In Gen 3, Phoebus was only found on a single route. Okay, not so bad so far. It can also only be caught by fishing, not surfing. Okay, still good, a little annoying, but fine. Oh, and the best part? It can only be caught on 6 specific titles that are random. Good luck. Oh, but if you thought that was bad, Gen 4 upped it. You thought 6 random tiles were bad? Well, at least they are consistent, so as soon as you find one, you just gotta remember where it is. Well, guess what? In Gen 4, not only did they decrease it to 4 tiles, but the tiles change place every day. So yeah, they were really just like, oh, you want a Feebas? You want a Feebas? Too bad. Now, yes, later generations would remove the tile thing, but the memory will haunt Pokemon fans forever. Okay, now you have Feebas. Now what? Well, just like Magikarp, it only learns the useless move Splash, so not much you can do with it there. Now, as terms of how to evolve it, you might have noticed that I listed 2 different methods. Well, that's because not every game has the original method required to evolve Feebas. You see, in games where that mechanic doesn't exist, all you have to do is trade Feebas holding the Prism Scale. However, in certain games, such as its debut and in Gen 4, plus the remakes, there are these things called contests where you put your Pokemon into a beauty show, basically. And there are different stats that you're able to raise. One of them is beauty. If you get Feebas to a high enough beauty, it'll evolve. The problem here is that raising beauty is a very lengthy process that can take several days, since you need to feed it special items to raise the stat, but the items require berries, which respawn daily. So yeah, you want to evolve it? Too bad. Also, it should be noted that in games with pageants, the Prism scale isn't available, so, extra good luck for you, buddy. Anyway, if you manage to do all this, you get Milotic, often considered the most beautiful Pokemon, and it's said that if you see them, you'll instantly be cleared of any aggressive thoughts. Very subtle. So, was it worth it? No. Also, male Milotic have a shorter head fins, so yeah. Castform is a Pokemon created by weather scientists in order to predict the weather. As such, whenever the weather changes, Castform's appearance and type will change to reflect the current weather. It should also be noted that the transformation is an automatic process, and Castform has no control over its shapeshifting. In sunlight, Castform becomes a fire type. This Pokemon is very dried out and hot to the touch. Notably, it's mentioned that when Castform was placed under heat lamps, it didn't change, implying that it's not the heat that they're reacting to when they become this form. In the rain, they become a water type. In this form, they're like a sponge, constantly absorbing and then spitting out water. Similar to the heat lamp experiment, when this Pokemon's placed in a shower, it didn't react, so it's not the water that makes it change. Finally, in the hail, they become an ice type. In this form, they're very, very cold and as smooth as ice. And continuing the test from above, Castform didn't change when placed in a freezer, so it's not the cold weather that makes it change. Overall, a very interesting Pokemon, but a bit too gimmicky to be a valid fighter, and, well, a certain aspect about its design has made it rather infamous. I'll let you figure out what it is. Kecleon was one of the first Gen 3 Pokemon revealed, being shown off as early as 2001, 2 years before the generation started. Kecleon is a chameleon with the ability to camouflage, which is Hollywood camouflage, so it's more like invisibility. Anyway, the only part of their body they can't change the color of is that zigzag on their stomach, which is a dead giveaway to their position. And just like a real chameleon, they have a long, sticky tongue that they could use to grapple prey. It's also mentioned that the healthier they are, the darker colors they turn into. They also get grumpy if no one notices them for so long, so despite having invisibility, they're pretty big attention hogs. Now, while this color changing doesn't happen in gameplay, it is related to its signature ability, Color Change, which causes it to become the same type as the last move that hit it. Yeah, sounds great unless a Pokemon has a move from a type they're strong against, so, eh. Kecleon is also notable for its role in the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon spin-off series. It's basically a series where you play as a Pokemon in a dungeon crawler game. In this series, Kecleon acts as a shopkeeper where you're able to steal from. However, if you do steal from them, you'll get swarmed by a bunch of them with beefed up stats who will probably kill you in just a few hits. So, remember kids, stealing is wrong. Boy, if I had a nickel for every time a Nintendo game had a shopkeeper with an insta-kill weapon, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, blah blah blah, happened twice, blah blah blah. Shuppet is a ghostly puppet, I guess? I don't know, I never got what they were going for if it's design. Anyway, Shuppet is a creepy little bugger that likes to feed on the feeling of jealousy, which they absorb through their horns. In fact, in the Pokemon world, it's said that you should avoid the houses of people whose house attracts Shuppets, since that will mean they have a very envious personality. At level 37, they become Banette, the haunted doll, which, much like Cubone, has a backstory despite clearly being a species. It's said that Banette is a doll that gains sentience out of hatred for being thrown away by its owner, and to this day, it seeks revenge. In addition, when its mouth opens, it'll release a cursed energy that'll affect anyone near it. Also, in Gen 3, it was mentioned that they can also put a curse on people by sticking needles in their body, like a voodoo doll. But this detail was dropped and was only brought up again in the Gen 3 remakes, presumably because they didn't want to imply the existence of a real religion in a Pokemon game. Now back to the backstory. Much like Cubone, the fact that Banette has a story raises a lot of questions. And it's even worse than Cubone, since at least Cubone was a first stager, but Banette is an evolution, so where does Shuppet fit into this? Similar to how apparently there was an entire species whose mom dies, is there just an army of the same doll who got thrown away and is now seeking revenge? That also learned how to breed, I guess? Oh well, riddle for the ages. Also, it's mentioned that it's believed that if you treat a Banette nice enough, it'll turn into an inanimate toy again, so take that for what you will. Banette also got a Mega Evolution. In this form, it's constantly emitting cursed energy to the point that it'll even curse its own trainer. So yeah, evolve with caution. So yeah, the Haunted Doll Pokemon, pretty cool. Duskull is a creepy little ghost of a skull on its face and only one eyelight. Duskull is a sort of boogeyman-like figure in that it often targets naughty kids and takes them away to an unknown place. In fact, they love the crying of children and will often startle them just to hear the sound of those tears. And like traditional boogeymen, they hate the sunlight. At level 37, they evolve into Dusclops, the cycloptic mummy. This guy is completely hollow under those wraps, and once something goes into them, they never come out. Watch out when they feed, as when they do, they suck in everything around them like a black hole. It's also mentioned that they prey on will-o'-the-wisps. Yes, as in the spirits from European folklore. Not a Pokemon equivalent, the real deal. They also have hypnosis powers that they can use to make anything do exactly what it wants. When traded with a Reaper's Cloth, they evolve into Dusknoir, the Pokemon Grim Reaper. This Pokemon will often receive signals from the afterlife telling it to take certain people there. And they've been known to swallow people with their stomach mouth, but this only extracts their soul, at which point they spit the body out. However, like the actual Grim Reaper, they're not bad creatures, they're just doing their job. In fact, it's mentioned that they help guide lost souls to their final resting place, and attacks on healthy people are rare. In fact, it's mentioned that there's a chance they don't even have free will and are controlled by whatever is sending them signals. So don't fear the Poke Reaper. From Boogeyman to Mummy to Reaper, quite the glow up. Tropius is a weird flying sauropod thing. Yeah, it's one of those vague inspiration Pokemon. Anyway, this Pokemon has bananas growing from its chin, and it's able to fly using the leaves on its back. The fruit on its chin is considered a delicacy and is a popular snack in regions they're native to, with them being considered especially tasty in Alola. Unfortunately, these bunches only come out twice a year, so it's probably a long wait for harvesting time. Yeah, not much to say here. Single stages generally don't have too much to talk about unless they have some sort of gimmick. Armeko is one of those Pokemon where it feels like they wanted it to be forgotten about. In Gen 3, it's only found in one area, and even then it has a very low encounter rate. Plus, there are better psychic types even within Gen 3, so it really doesn't stand out. Anyway, for some reason, this of all Pokemon was given a baby form. And I thought Mantine getting one was weird. Anyway, this is Chingling, a Pokemon that looks like a mini bell. They have a small ball in their throats, and they can move around in order to create a ringing noise. They can also make noises so high that while humans can't hear them, they can still get hurt by them. At high friendship, they evolve into Chimecho, which is a Pokemon based on a wind chime, and they store the noises they make inside of themselves so they can release them as ultrasonic blasts. They can also release them as beautiful singing that they use to communicate with others. Their tail is also prehensile. Also, for some reason, I always think this is a Gen 2 Pokemon. Other than that, not much to say here. Like I said, very forgettable Pokemon. Absol is a weird cat-dog thing with a scythe-like structure on its face. This Pokemon has the ability to detect natural disasters and will often try to warn people about them. But sadly, like a certain guy who we don't talk about, people ended up assuming that they were the cause behind the horrible things that happened, when in reality they were just giving a warning. Luckily though, in recent times people realized this, and it's said that only old people still think they cause disasters, so it's a good thing that its reputation is improving. Absol also has a mega form where it gains a pair of fluffy wings, but they can't actually fly. Instead, the wings create an aura of intimidation that makes whatever they're confronting scared. It's also mentioned that Absol hates this form since they despise fighting. So yeah, like I said last video, I have to wonder if there are protests towards the concept of mega evolutions because of things like this. Snorunt is a Pokemon that's constantly shivering, but don't let that fool you. This Pokemon actually loves the cold, and in fact, its diet consists of ice and snow. Unlike Absol, these Pokemon are seen as good luck charms, as it's believed that if a Snorunt enters your house, then whoever lives in it will become very prosperous. At level 42, they evolve into Glalie, the Angry Snowball. This Pokemon has impressive chirokinetic powers, being able to freeze water in the air into whatever shape they want, and they can almost instantly freeze their enemies too, which allows them to eat them without any resistance. It's also made out of rock despite not being a rock type, and they're said that their ice is impossible to melt and is as hard as steel. If you instead have a female Snorunt, you can give it a Dawnstone and evolve it into Frostlass, which is based on the Japanese ice ghost Hoochiana. It's said that Frostlass was once human, who was then resurrected into a Frostlass after they died, which, considering it's an evolution of a non-ghost type, makes No sense. These Pokemon, like their counterpart, will freeze prey before eating them. However, if they like the appearance of what they freeze, they will instead take them to their den and use them as a decoration. It's said that their favorite food are the souls of men. And finally, it's said that on snowy nights they come into civilization and knock on doors. We don't find out what happens afterward, but the Pokedex is very clear when it says, "Do not open it if you hear a knock in the middle of the night." Actually, that's good advice in general, so... Similar to the Slowpoke line, only one form has a Mega Evolution, not the other. In this case, it's Glalie, who gains a jaw made out of black rock. This Pokemon is so full of energy that its jaw split open, making it constantly spewing out blizzards. They also can't eat in this form, so that's lovely. So yeah, the creepy ice monsters. Spooky, ooh. Spheal is a seal that is a sphere. Not much more to say there. As you can imagine by their design, this Pokemon primarily moves by rolling around, which, thanks to their fluffy fur, doesn't even feel cold at all. Also, despite being seals, they're not good at swimming yet, so they instead mostly move by rolling around on ice floats. Level 32, they evolve into Celio, which now resembles a walrus more, as you can tell by the mustache. Celio are very curious creatures with a very sensitive nose. When they come across anything new, they will bounce it on their nose, whether it be inanimate or another Pokemon. And finally, at level 44, they evolve into Walrein. This Pokemon is very tough, capable of destroying icebergs using only its tusks. And their thick blubber layer makes a lot of attacks bounce harmlessly off of them. They're also herd animals, with the alpha male protecting the others from enemies. And like sharks, if they lose a tusk, it'll just grow right back. So yeah, ice walruses. I wonder what the carpenter would be. Clamperl is a clam. This Pokemon has a very sturdy shell that is both used for protection and as a way to clamp onto prey so they can eat it. However, one aspect about Clamperl that's always confused me is the pearl itself. According to the Dex, its pearl is a pearl that amplifies psychic powers. It's the same thing I mentioned earlier with Spoink. However, the thing that's always confused me is the face on the pearl. Like, that's clearly a face, and it can emote. So is the pink thing not actually the pearl and the Dex is talking about something else? Ugh, this is too confusing for me. Also notably, despite being a Pokemon that only evolves through trading, it's mentioned that wild specimens go through changes when they're about to evolve, implying that trait evolutions still happen in the wild, which is something that's always been something that I wondered about the franchise, since do trait evolutions actually exist in the wild, or are they a man-made thing? And I guess Clamperl proves that they're a natural phenomenon. Now, Clamperl has two possible evolutions, both are trait-induced. First, we got Huntail, which Clamperl evolves into when traded with a deep-sea tooth. This Pokemon is inspired by deep-sea fish like gulper and dragonfish. And fittingly, it lives in the dark depths of the ocean, where it uses its fish-shaped tail in order to attract prey. It's also said that if they wash ashore, then that's an omen of bad things to come. If you instead trade Clamperl with a deep-sea scale, it'll evolve into Gorbis. This Pokemon is a lamprey, and like its inspiration, it sucks the blood of other creatures, which is what gives it its pink color. So yeah, from clam to lamprey to French creature. Very odd line. Relicanth is a coelacanth. Just like the prehistoric fish, Relicanth has gone hundreds of millions of years without any notable changes, and they were also thought to have been extinct before being rediscovered. Hilariously, it's said that the reason it hasn't changed is because it's potentially a perfect life form, so take that for what you will. Also, they're apparently named after their discoverer. Yes, I said named after. Now, the reason I bring this up is because in the Pokemon anime, Pokemon can only say their own names, which led to the fandom having a chicken and egg debate as to if Pokemon can only say their own name or if they're named after the only thing they can say. And here comes Relicanth throwing a curveball in this debate since it says right there that they are named after someone. So I don't know what to think anymore. Also, males have longer jowls? Yeah, I don't care what the proper term is. Love Disc is a fish shaped like a heart, possibly based on the discus. Fittingly, this Pokemon is seen as a symbol of love, with it being said that giving Love Disc to your partner will guarantee eternal love. These Pokemon are also very social, as during mating season they come together in massive swarms that dye the seas pink. And if they're alone, they become incredibly apathetic, which makes some prime targets for fish eaters. However, Love is more infamous for how garbage of a Pokemon it is. Love will often be seen in top 10 worst Pokemon lists. Not only do people find it weird looking, but it has absolutely horrible stats and doesn't even have a good move pool. However, despite being seen as weak, they're still a valuable catch due to how they come with an item called the Heart Scale, which allows you to pay a guy to remind your Pokemon of a move that it lost. But since that mechanic has been dropped in newer games, Love went right back to being useless. Congratulations, Buttfish. Baggin is the Gen 3 pseudo-legendary. This little guy dreams of flying, and as such will often throw themselves off cliffs in an attempt to fly. Normally, such behavior would result in a very quick extinction, but nature found a way and they ended up having a steel hide to protect themselves from the fall. Their inability to fly has also given them anger issues due to this lack of wings, so they often take their anger out by headbutting rocks until they're just gravel. At level 30, they evolve into Shelgon. Okay, this is the second pseudo-legendary to pupate. This has to be based on something. Anyway, like real cocoons, inside the shell there's a procedure where the cells in their body are going through drastic changes into their adult body, I guess. It depends on what side you're on in the evolution age debate. This Pokemon is extremely heavy and the shell is nearly impossible to penetrate. And like other pupa, they don't eat in this form. Finally, at level 50, they have finally achieved their dream of flight when they become Salamence. These Pokemon are so overjoyed at the ability to fly that they end up burning things down out of excitement. Well, that's one way to celebrate, I guess. Also, despite finally achieving their dream, they still have a bad temper, as when they're mad, they lose all sense of reasoning and just attack everything indiscriminately. How fun. Salamence also has a Mega Evolution where its wings become gigantic. These wings are built for fast flying, and their wings are so sharp that they can cut most creatures into two. They're so aggressive that they'll even attack their own trainers. Because of this, they've been given the nickname of the Blood-Soaked Crescent, which sounds like the name of an emo band from the 2000s. There's also the Paradox Pokemon Roaring Moon, who strangely resembles Mega Salamence, causing some to believe that there's a potential connection. But other than that, typical Paradox, it looks like a magazine things. Surprise! Gen 3 has not one, but two pseudo-legendaries. This is the Beldum line, starting out as Beldum. These guys have magnetic waves flowing through their body instead of blood, which allows them to float and magnetize anything they want. In fact, it said they communicate with magnetism, but I'm still not sure what that means. If threatened, they also have claws on their backside that are very sharp. And if they're mad, they release an EMP. So I hope you're not in a city when that happens. At level 20, they evolve into Matang. Similar to, few Gen 1 Pokemon, Matang is described as being two Beldum fused together, despite only needing one Beldum to reach this form. Anyway, despite being made of metal, they're not slow at all, being capable of reaching speeds of 60 miles an hour. In addition, they are known to have full-on psychic powers instead of just magnetism, so that's good for them. And they're so tough that they won't even feel it if a jet crashes into them. Finally, at level 45, they evolve into the crab-like Metagross. Like Beldum into Matang, this form is said to be the result of two Matang fusing together. I'm not touching that again. Thanks to having four brains, Metagross is very intelligent, being capable of processing information even better than the world's most powerful computers. This intelligence gives them an excellent advantage in battle since they can calculate what their opponent will do and react accordingly. They also have a Mega Evolution, which is said to be a composite of one Metagross, one Matang, and two Beldum. These guys are even smarter, resulting in battles that are described as being hard to watch. In addition, they refuse to allow their opponent to win. If Metagross feels like it's on the verge of losing, it'll bury its claws into its opponent and blow itself up just to make sure their enemy can't have the win. Like I said, Mega Evolution is kinda messed up. Golem may have been named after golems, but these guys are definitely the ones who are based on them. This group was created by the Titan Regigigas, a Pokemon said to have moved the continents with its immense strength. Regigigas used to be a very revered Pokemon until one day people started to fear its power, so they locked it in the basement of a temple where it laid for who knows how long. Meanwhile, its creations were sent off to far-off lands in order to make sure they could never come together to free their master. Now, Regigigas being sealed away is presumably the intention behind its signature ability Slow Start, which halves attack and speed for the first few turns it's out. So yeah, I think it's supposed to be implied that it's still getting its bearings, but that's the best theory I got. Also notably, Regigigas can be encountered at level 1, which is the lowest of any legendary Pokemon. Now, this would seem to imply that Pokemon can actually lose levels if they go too long without fighting, which is definitely something to think about. Now that we got their master out of the way, let's look at the individual Regis. First, we got Regirock, created by Clay. This Pokemon is made completely of rocks, with testing indicating that it doesn't have any organs at all. It's also mentioned that Regirock's composition is made up of rocks from completely different continents, indicating that Regigigas went all over to create the perfect rock being. And finally, if injured, it can just heal itself by gathering more rocks. So yeah, pretty rocky history, but overall pretty good. Wait, how does it have a rocky history? I never mentioned anything bad happened. Ah, never mind. Next up, we got Regice. Or is it Regice? I don't care. A Pokemon made during the Ice Age. This Pokemon is extremely cold, reaching temperatures hundreds of degrees below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. It also can't be melted, even by lava. Regice is said to be so cold that anything that even goes remotely near it will instantly be frozen. Then we got Registeel, the Pokemon who had to be censored because one of its sprites had an unfortunate resemblance to a salute done by the angry German people. Yeah, that was a thing that happened. Anyway, this guy was made from lava, and the steel composing its body is said to be stronger than any metal known to man, and since it spent so much time underground, it's incredibly durable, not being able to be scratched by anything. Surprisingly, though, it's described as being hollow inside. Now, for years, it was assumed that Regigigas only made 3 golems, but then Gen 8 revealed that there were 2 more who were sealed away in another country entirely. The first of these 2 is Regieleki, made from pure electricity. This guy is so full of lightning that it could power an entire country by itself. It's also noted that the rings on its arms are actually a restraint, and if removed, then its full power would be unleashed. And the last Regi is Regidrago, a Pokemon made from crystallized dragon energy that's said to have the power of every single dragon type. So yeah, the Regis. Cool concept, but a pain in the butt to obtain unless you can read Braille. If you know, you know. Latios and Latias are 2 psychic dragons who sadly do not have much lore around them. We're not even sure of their relationship. They could be siblings or lovers, for all we know. It's left pretty vague. Anyways, these 2 Pokemon are very fast, capable of overtaking jet planes, and befitting of their psychic type, they're very intelligent, being able to perfectly understand human speech. It's also mentioned that they have feathers, which threw me off since I always thought that was skin. Now in Gen 3, these 2 are version exclusives, but they're actually found in the game of their opposite color. So the blue Latios is found in Ruby, while the red Latias is found in Sapphire. And if you're wondering about Emerald, you get to pick which one you get to catch. In Gen 3, they were roaming legendaries, so they could run away and were very difficult to catch. How fun. But in the remakes, they were instead just given to you, presumably because they were tied to the new soaring mechanic and they didn't want anyone to miss out. Now, despite being version exclusives, the other dragon can be found if you have the event-only item called the Eon Ticket, where you're able to go to their home island and catch the one not in your game. And this goes for both the originals and the remake. Oh yeah, they also have Mega Evolutions, which don't have lore. No, I'm done. No more fake stories. Goodbye. The Weathered Trio? Oh, I'm sorry. The Super Ancient Trio? Yeah, no, I'm not calling them that. That name is ridiculously generic and doesn't narrow things down at all. So I'm calling them the Weathered Trio. I don't care what Game Freak calls them. That's what I'm calling them. Anyway, this trio is based on the biblical monsters that we're not given much information about because it assumes you already know what they are. And each one controls a different aspect of the earth. First, we got Kyogre, who is Leviathan mixed with an Orca. This Pokemon is said to have created the sea thanks to its ability to summon gigantic amounts of rain, flooding the once barren landscape with water. On land, we got Groudon, who is Behemoth mixed with a theropod dinosaur. This Pokemon created the land and is capable of creating immense drought in order to dry up water, as well as make volcanoes for there to be more land. Because of their opposing viewpoints on what there should be more of, Kyogre and Groudon got into absolutely brutal showdowns that could very easily have ended the world, if not for the final and most powerful Pokemon of this group putting a stop to it and putting them to sleep for millennia, at least until they are awoken in a gang war, causing them to have to be stopped again. This brings us nicely to Rayquaza, the leader of this trio and the first example of a reoccurring pattern Pokemon would do from here on out, where the first 2 games in a generation have a plot revolving around whatever legendary is on the box, and the other box legendary is exclusive to the other game, but in both versions there's a legendary that you can find elsewhere, and it seems to be connected to the box legendaries, but nothing is official yet, but then another version comes out and reveals the connection that the box legendary on the 3rd version had to the first 2. That was a mouthful, I apologize. Anyway, let's get back to Rayquaza. Based on the Zizzbird mixed with a serpent, Rayquaza lives in the ozone layer, and it's his job to make sure that Kyogre and Groudon don't end the world with their petty squabbles, which it's able to do thanks to its ability Airlock, which gets rid of any weather. Now notably, despite being clearly the leader of them, it's never been clarified if Rayquaza created the other two, or if they were always a trio and Rayquaza just rose to power as a way to keep them in check. I'll let you believe what you want when it comes to their origins. In the Gen 3 remakes, Groudon and Kyogre have what are known as origin forms. Theirs are similar to Mega Evolutions, except that instead of Mega Evolving, they end up becoming what is said to be their original forms before they were banished to sleep. In these forms, they also gain abilities that completely nullify a type. Kyogre gets Primordial Sea, which nullifies fire types, and Groudon gets Desolate Land, where it becomes so hot water-type moves can't be used. Meanwhile, Rayquaza actually gets a true Mega Evolution, which it notably doesn't need a stone to turn into like every other one. In this form, Rayquaza creates a huge windstorm that not only still blocks out any other weather, but it removes Flying-type Pokemon's weaknesses. Also, its stats are higher than the god of the Pokemon world. So yeah, don't mess with these guys. They could very easily cause the apocalypse if they wanted to. I wonder if they killed each other if the survivors would feast on their flesh like their inspirations. Oh well, who knows. The Mew of Gen 3. Jirachi is a wish granter. This Pokemon sleeps for 1,000 years and then awakens for a single week before going right back to bed. However, during this time they will grant the wish of whoever makes one. Sadly though, you don't actually get to make wishes when you have one because that would break the game. Also, unlike Celebi, they don't have a side quest, you're just given them. Lame. Surprise! Gen 3 has multiple Pokemon you can only get with an event. But let me say right now, if you think 2 is unfair, oh boy, just wait, because it will get worse. Anyways, Deoxys comes from an extraterrestrial virus that was mutated by cosmic rays, which caused the microorganism to mutate and become a sapient humanoid life form, with its brain being on its chest. It's that pink thing right there, in case you couldn't tell. Anyway, Deoxys possesses minor shape-shifting powers where it's capable of altering its appearance in order to specialize in a certain attribute. There's the attack form where it becomes more aggressive, the defense form where it becomes bulkier in order to better absorb blows, and the speed form which, well, just take a guess. In Gen 3, Deoxys' forms were locked to different games. Normal form was found in Ruby and Sapphire, attack form was for Fire Red, defense was for Leaf Green, and the speed form was found in Emerald. Also in Gen 3, you could not change Deoxys' form. Whichever one you had was the one you had. However, later games would include a place where you could alter its form, so they're not locked anymore. Like Celebi, instead of just being given to you, you were instead given the ability to hunt it down to an island where you push a triangle around and then summon it. Deoxys is also notable for the fact that it was the very first mythical Pokemon who you could catch in regular gameplay, as in the Gen 3 remakes, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Deoxys appears as the final boss of the game's epilogue. So after all these years, it ain't an event no more. Well, that was all the Pokemon in Gen 3. Pretty cool bunch, and I like how a lot of them are based on tropical species. I guess since they had more colors to work with, they wanted to go more crazy with the palettes, and tropical species were the perfect choice. Join me next time when we go to Gen 4, aka Gen 2's older brother. Until then, I've been Mr. G. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.